the last presentation for the semester 1 series of architectural practice in India, a millennial archaeology. And I want to kind of just give a brief introduction to C-City. It's the public outreach arm of the School of Environment and Architecture, and we have been doing this series for the last more than 10 years now, where we have conducted more than 200 lectures and discussions with a varied, diverse group of people who help us expand the architecture discipline into the larger public sphere. And this particular season of C-City conversations is around understanding the shifts, the millennial shifts that have taken place in architectural practice. And we have had many sessions so far discussing, the turn of architectural practice into these large multinational corporate practices, the way in which certain kind of urban fringes get activated into architectural practice. We have seen the way in which heritage and environmental discourses have taken particular directions. And today we are, for example, last week we had a conversation around heritage conservation practice, where we saw a cross-section change from expanding the definition of heritage in the South Asian context to a move for decolonizing the understanding of heritage and then bringing the everyday built environment under the ambit of heritage discourse by the practitioners that were invited. Today, we will look at the turn to the city as practice, and today's session is called the urban turn, or the urbanistic impulse that we see particularly after the 90s or in the early millennium. And just to frame a kind of background for today's discussion, I'll read out the concept note that was also shared across our platforms. The developmental push for making world-class cities in the 90s gave a certain impetus to architects in thinking about space at an urban scale, where on the one hand, new building typologies such as malls, flyovers, and gated complexes introduced a new order and scale of urban experience that required a revised approach to design. Older neighborhoods and informal settlements came to be under risk of displacement and rehabilitation to accommodate fresh infrastructure and release real estate for new building activity. For example, in Bombay, the closure of mills, the introduction of flyovers, the reclamation of land creates new challenges for architectural design. In this context, campaigns like Smart Cities, India Shining encourage Indian cities to imitate Western modes or models of growth, often raising questions of appropriate urban form, involving aspects of fairness, of sustainability, of equal access to public resources. And these are inseparable from the city, and therefore architects soon find themselves articulating an approach for built form that gives rise to spatial practices of urban design, city advocacy, and urban research and design in the public realm. So this session will explore this whole change in further detail, and it will ask questions such as, how does the city itself become central to architectural practice at the turn of the millennium? What roles have architects played in shaping urban life, and what gaps remain in their approaches? And why has the city emerged as a pressing concern for architecture over the past 2 decades? And to discuss this, we have 3 very interesting practitioners with us whom I would like to introduce to you. Our first speaker today will be Anirudh Paul. Anirudh Paul is an architect, urban designer, and academic leader based in Mumbai. He holds a Bachelor of Architecture from Bengal Engineering College and a Masters of Architecture in the School of Planning, from the School of Planning and Architecture in New Delhi. His work focuses on the intersections of design, policy, and community, particularly in the context of urban transformation, housing, slum upgradation, waterfront development, and heritage conservation. Over the years, Anirudh has contributed to multiple city-level planning initiatives and state committees in Maharashtra. His academic leadership has also fostered experimental and critical pedagogies in urbanism. Committed to socially responsive and inclusive planning, he is recognized for engaging with the complexities of the Indian city, addressing its architectural, ecological, and cultural dimensions through both design practice and institutional leadership. Our second panelist is Jasmine Saluja. Jasmine Saluja is a Mumbai-based architect and urban designer and a founding partner of Plural, which is an interdisciplinary design and policy practice. With over 2 decades of experience, she works at the interface of design, research, and governance. Her work focuses on shaping cities through inclusive public realm design, community engagement, and strategic planning. At Plural, Jasmine leads urban design, research, and policy initiatives that aim to make cities more equitable and accessible. She has contributed to projects that address heritage precincts, transport infrastructure, participatory mapping, and design for informal settlements. Trained as an architect, Jasmine brings a critical understanding of the layered socio-political realities of urban India, translating these into design frameworks and policy conversations. She also teaches and contributes to architectural education and public forums, advocating how spatial design can be both a technical and cultural tool for shaping more just cities. And our last panelist for today is Sarfraz Momin. Sarfraz Momin is an urban designer and architect based in Mumbai and a founding partner at Studio Pod, where Pod stands for Planning, Outreach, and Design. It was established in 2013. He completed, sorry? Oh, okay, people-oriented design. I mean, you have one more option now. He completed his Bachelor of Architecture from Sir J.J. College of Architecture, Mumbai, and holds a Master's degree in Urban Design from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. Sarfaraz's work focuses on integrating urban design with infrastructure, landscape, and mobility systems, enabling cities to become more sustainable, walkable, and connected. His expertise spans master planning, transit-oriented development, and large-scale public realm interventions, both in India and internationally. At Studio Pod, he leads projects that combine design excellence with strategic urban thinking, collaborating with public agencies, private clients, and community groups. He has contributed to smart city and transit integration projects across Indian metros, pushing for people-centric urbanism. So these will be our 3 conversants today, and I would like to now invite Anirudh to share a presentation about his practice. Anirudh.
Okay. Thank you, Anuj, for that introduction. So what I'll do is, so it will be a 10 minutes presentation, as I understand that's the time given. So I'll try to put the practice which we do from like my experience both through academics and through research within a certain framework, which will probably try to provoke certain questions. I don't think like, and the certain slides which I'm going to show you are certain parts of works. It's not going to be a complete work for sure. It's going to just provoke certain questions so that we can take it up for discussion further. So what I'll do is I'll show my work within 2 frameworks and 2 questions which basically it's my personal experience which working with the city like we have engaged with and we have been engaging with for a long period of time. So the 2 questions which are 2 engagements which I generally want to foreground is this whole idea of all of you are involved as architects as shaping the object, and like in this process of shaping the object, okay, being architects, like we assume that there is certain autonomy, there is certain autonomous processes by which you can shape the object. So like, but like more and more that I have been engaged with, and I have been also looking at that whole possibility of the autonomy of the object. We have always felt that the object is being included in a field which itself shapes the object. So I'm not like creating this framework on my own. A lot of this framework comes from a architectural theorist called Stan Allen. Okay, and like what we have been looking at is the field which informs the object. Okay, the field informs the object in many complex manners, and the field actually shapes the object. So to be able to understand the field in which the object is placed is a very important engagement when you are engaging with the urban. The moment you look at the architecture of the urban, the understanding of the field might be composed of many systems. It might be the political system, the economic system, the social system, but that is very, very important. It informs the object, and the object is embedded in that. Though we are sometimes made to believe that the object can be autonomous, but within my engagement with the urban, that is something which we have been like experiencing quite a lot, that the object is shaped, the field has to be understood. So I'll show you some of the processes of how do you reveal the field, how do you understand the field. Okay, very important to the understanding of shaping this object is first to understand the field in where we are inserting. So that is something which I want to foreground as far as the engagement with the urban is concerned. The second thing which I want to talk about is this whole notion of the understanding of reality. Okay, we as architects, like when we see the product, the final product, we understand reality, that there is a reality which is shaped by the object, which I come again from the idea of the object. But reality can exist where the object is just a part of other processes that are layered. So that's something very, very important. We are not given to understand the whole. We understand only a part of that reality. The reality might sometimes exist, and those might be, again as I'm saying, existing in systems which are like completely unknown to us, by stakeholders which are completely unknown to us. So it's very, very important that how do we engage with these processes. You might be a tiny part of the whole reality. Okay, so this is the second aspect that I want to place as far as the engagement with the urban is concerned. So as I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you some of my slides, okay, of works of how we have been engaging with these two processes, so that we can take up questions as we go further. And when I'm showing this, as I'm saying, I'm not highlighting the projects, but I'll highlight you the engagements that we had. So I'll just wait for the presentation to come. No problem, no problem. Okay, so let me just tell you also that my engagement, our engagement now presently, and I'll show you the projects which are located in the urban periphery. And both these projects are located in the Vasai-Virar sub-region, where I'm presently practicing from. And both are urban in nature. Okay, the first project which I show you is called Mapping the Unmapped. Okay, it is trying to understand very unseen mobility systems that operate in our cities. Okay, it's actually a study of the auto rickshaw ecosystem, okay, which we all maybe experience, which we all know of, which all must have used. But to understand how important they are in our cities, this is actually engagement with that. And that's the first thing of the urban, to be able to understand and able to reveal certain things which are extremely important processes in our cities, but which we generally take for granted. So that is something very, very important with the engagement of the urban. That's something I would place. As I'm saying, I'm not going to the project that we did. I'm going to show you 3 slides and how we reveal the importance of a system which is generally unseen, unmapped. Okay. So first of all, when we started this study, okay, the first thing we did was to understand the ecosystem of this system. Like, who are the actors, who are the agencies who are involved in this. It's just not the auto driver. It's a very complex system where there are governments. I'll just point where there are government agencies, there are political parties, there are unions, Okay, there are obviously the operators of the autos, there are the users. So within this complex system, this understanding is located within this understanding of the auto rickshaw. As I'm saying that I won't go into detail of this, but this is a very important engagement of being able to reveal these processes which take place in the urban. Okay, like just to understand, to make you understand this system, we have been mapping this system in one station only, Nala Sopara. That's the eastern part of Nala Sopara. Okay, and what we reveal is that there are 21 routes which are there in this system which serves the people for providing what is called the first and last mile connectivity in this area. How much people does it serve? It serves nearly 0.5 million people. 0.5 million people only in Nala Sopara East gets served by this system. Lot of them are informal settlements in the industrial areas, and lot of them are middle class neighborhoods in areas near the station. So 0.5 million people get served. Like we were trying to understand the number of trips. I'll tell you, we have used a combination of digital tools to understand the number of trips that these auto rickshaws do every day. There are 18,000 trips which these auto rickshaws from one station actually they operate. And you know the amount of kilometer it serves is 75,000 kilometers per day. Now 75,000 kilometer translates to going from Mumbai to Paris 8 times a day. So that's the amount of like distance these auto rickshaws actually cover. Okay, so just to understand this system, what I'm trying to say, these are not understood, these serve, they are there, but we have to be able to reveal. That's why we call it mapping the unmapped. And this is an extremely important engagement when you are dealing with the urban. This is what I want to point out. Okay, just to show you another slide. Okay, these are 21 routes. What we just can, go ahead. Okay, so this is a simulation. The simulation which simulates the location of the auto rickshaw. If you see, that's a 10-minute like cycle. This is the morning hours, somewhere around 4 o'clock in the morning. So this is simulation. This is not reality. Okay, so this we have obviously after the mapping process, we have been able to create a possible simulation of where these auto rickshaws are using digital tools again to understand how this system works. And as you see through the day, you will see the build-up of this system and how actually in the night they are the most in numbers. Okay, but this is a system which we understood only through mapping. Though we have some like understanding that, well, this is the way it could work, but that's not the way it reveals itself. We think that the peak hours will be in the morning and the night, but actually the peak hours are only in the night. And that's the reason being people rush to come back home before the last train stops. Okay, as you can see, it's already the night time, somewhere around 8 o'clock in the evening. So during 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock, they will be the most. Okay, so these are things what I'm trying to tell you is done through a process of mapping, through a process of revealing. So this is a very, very important process that you have to engage with when you are dealing with the urban. So that's one of the first proposition that I want to put forward. Okay, as there are some of these figures that you have seen, okay, of how, and as I'm saying that these are not calculated through studying through the day, it's a simulation. Okay, you cannot actually do completely calculate this because remember this is a demand driven system. This is not a schedule driven system. Like a bus might have a schedule, but these auto rickshaws are demand driven. So every day it changes. So these are clearly hinting, going towards approximations. Okay, so next project I'll show you. So this is the first project that I show you that we are dealing with in the periphery. The next project I'll show you is a project called Closing the Loop. And here we are involved again in the peri-urban areas, actually with recovering polluted water bodies. Okay, like I'll show you one of the images of what do we mean by polluted water bodies, something you all can associate with very easily. So these water bodies are water bodies where, like all of you must have seen, like water bodies where the storm water is always mixed with wastewater, with sometimes treated sewage or untreated sewage also. Okay, and they come into our water bodies like this. So these are two water body areas from where both are stormwater drains from where actually this whole system is getting polluted. So our project, actually we applied to the UNDP, the United Nations Development Program, under the climate change project, and we got selected and we got a fund for this. So that's the first thing. Like, so the process of even like funding, how we get the money, okay, is not that we wait for a client. Okay, we got the proposal. At that point of time, we engaged with the community, we understood the problem, and actually applied for a project and got the funding. So it was not that we had to wait for a client to give us funds for this, but we got the first funding mainly to actually map and conduct a pilot. So we'll show you how we have actually engaged with this project. Okay, so this was our imagination. So first of all, it would be to treat the water body using nature-based solution. What you saw, the pollution coming in, it would be actually treating the water body through using nature-based solution, primarily through reed beds, biodigesters. I'll show you how we are implementing this project. We are implementing this project now. Okay, and then recover this water body and treat it as a farm. So what are we going to do with the water body? Is treat it as a farm, do aquaculture, duck rearing, and also get carbon credits, okay, from this water body itself. Okay, recover its complete ecosystem, and the surrounding women who live near the water body, they would be involved in aquaculture. They would be trained towards aquaculture. Okay, mainly aquaculture and using float farms, productive float farms. So that's what they would be involved in. Okay, and obviously the first engagement, first aspect of this project was to build community support. Though we had an idea, it was not to go and implement there. Nobody would have given you the permission to implement. That's what I say, that when I talk of realism, one is the idea of that you have a project. The other is the idea that you have to realize that there are processes where you have to completely change mindsets. To be able to get something called nature-based solution accepted to people, it takes a lot of engagement with people. It takes care. You have to build it through a process of making them understand why do you need to adopt this system. Okay. So the first thing we started off actually are these workshops where we were training these people towards understanding how could these water bodies be used productively. So this is a like a workshop where we had built a small float farm in that same water body that you see, which actually can grow vegetables. Okay, and along with that, it can start with aquaculture. So our first thing was not to go and build the project. First thing was to engage the community immediately into the process of trying to get their trust, build trust with them, because that's a very, very important process. Even in the first project that you saw, when we were actually mapping the auto rickshaws, we had used people, like we had actually employed people who were the family members of the drivers. We had trained them to use mobile phones, and they had actually helped us to document. So that's a very important aspect. And how did we engage and how did we build the trust? Very important for this process of trust building was that we are till now involved with them. We will engage with the municipal governments to improve their conditions, because there are so many problems that they face with the auto rickshaws. There are lack of parking spaces. There is a lot of health issues that they face. Okay, they have no proper clinics, no hospitals. So those are some things that we promise to engage with. So that's how you build trust. So this is a process of trust building which the urban will require. Absolutely important. Okay. So I'll show you the next slide. Okay, so these are imaginations what we want, and these are some things which all of you are conversant with, process of, but like this incorporates, as we had shown, our imagination incorporates the ecological aspect, the aspect of building the public realm, okay, aspect of involving the community, all are together, they are not separate from each other. Okay, so this is another imagination, this is another imagination coming from another such water body in Navi Mumbai, where its ecology, there are small insertions which are being built in the edge of the water body. These are some of the holding ponds of Navi Mumbai, which we had been called to give some ideas on, but similar processes. Okay, Okay, now we will show you how we are trying to implement. That's the stage. So this is the stage where, like where we had shown you where the wastewater is coming. So if you see the wastewater we had shown you comes from these two areas. Okay. This is the one of these areas where the wastewater comes from. So this is a settling pond that we are building, a holding pond, and this is a biodigester which we are building again using nature-based solution. The water gets treated, and this is a reed bed in which the final polishing happens. We bring back the water into the pond back again and then use it for aquaculture. So that's how this whole project is happening. This is in the summer months. So that's the stage of construction. We are now in the monsoon months, so the construction is stopped now. But as the water recedes, this project should be towards completion. Okay. But again, let me tell you, through this whole process, we have engaged local labor. All these frameworks and everything that you see are built from the skills which we found in the local area. So this was a very important part to engage and get community support. Even the whole aspect of how like we were creating awareness that this talab needs to be protected was through these processes of trust building, through the processes of showing them that look, here is a possibility where you can get new livelihoods, you can engage with this productive piece of proper understanding of the public realm, just not a public realm. So this is something we were trying to engage with. So this is like the process of construction going on. Okay, the contractor, as I have said, was local. This is the, apart from the generally, if you've seen these water bodies, they build concrete walls. So the idea was not to build concrete walls. The idea was to use these concrete frameworks and build gabion walls using generally stone and mud, so that the riparian zone vegetation is not destroyed. So riparian zone vegetation is taken care of through this type of intervention. And as you can see, this is the reed bed. So now the process of waterproofing is going on. So after that, the reed bed will start working, where there will be canna plants that are grown, which will polish the treated water and bring it back into the system. So this is a project which is in the intersection of infrastructure, ecology, and public realm creation. Okay, so this is the, as I'm saying, I'm not interested to show you the project, but what I'm interested to show you is the complexity of what we were involved with while trying to articulate an urban practice. That's the last slide. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anirudh, for taking us through right from the mapping to the actual ground stuff that happens. I'll now invite Jasmine Saluja to give a presentation.
Hello everyone. Thanks Paul for showing this, and I completely agree with you when you say that to initiate anything with the city, there are two things which are very vital. One is to be familiar with your urban field, and second is we always know a part of the story and we do not know the complete, because the number of stakeholders you engage with, that is your understanding of your urban field. And over a period of time is that when you realize, when these engagements keep on evolving and you different stakeholders, that you develop this understanding. Because at a given point in time, it is sometimes not your choice with whom you are engaging with, but it is the opportunity at that particular time and moment and the local political scenario which is happening that stimulates a certain condition for any public project to kind of progress in different stages of accomplishment. So adding to this is a very important thing is how we negotiate between all of this, because it is during these negotiations that you developed the trust, what even Paul mentioned, and also somewhere and you understand the local dynamics and the stories, and you are able to take that ahead. Being a professional, with a background in architecture and urban design and the kind of work we want to do in the city, we have realized over a period of time that it is majority part goes in understanding the field, negotiating, and then ultimately comes a time when you're actually designing the product. And by that time, the product itself has transformed. So it is a very complex kind of an engagement, and all the more complex when you are in an Indian city because the number of stakeholders are different, cultures vary, and it is your understanding because many a times you are not part of that culture. So I'm going to show something, it's a reel, a 2-minute reel. It's part of 2 short movies which we made as part of, kind of taking the research to a larger audience. And it is on an aspect of housing. And after this reel, then I will kind of just tell that how we have, kind of developed our understandings of working with the people in the city.
As nice as swanky, well-equipped apartments are, informal housing is just so much cheaper. Rent here can be as low as a third of what you'd pay for a formal rental in the same neighborhood. But this cheaper option often brings with it its own set of problems. People living in slums have to deal with things like poor sanitation, limited clean water, and bad infrastructure. Still, millions of Mumbaikars choose to live in a kholi, a small 10 by 10 room in a slum that they share with 10 to 15 other people. It's cramped, but it's affordable.
Slums are well distributed within the city, which is what people are looking for. They don't want to waste hours commuting, so they live in slums closer to their jobs. Because of this, new slums continue to pop up near neighborhoods with high-rise expensive apartments. The people serving the families in such buildings often come from the slums.
But the problem is bigger than just the lack of space. It's about the inequality embedded in urban growth. Many people, especially those with lower incomes, are pushed to the edges of the city and forced to live in poor conditions, even though they're the ones who keep it running. On average, as many as 19 service workers are needed to serve a middle-income family of 4. Smart financial planning and more housing options for all income levels are urgently needed, and the rental market has immense potential in fulfilling this need. Unfortunately, its continued negligence is proving to be costly. Until we comprehensively integrate rental housing into policy, we will remain handicapped in the quest to ensure housing for all.
Website, I'll have to come there, right? Or can the mouse operate from here? So what we have done regarding this project on renting realities, it's called, it is trying to understand the potential of rental housing within the city, especially within dense cities. It started by addressing and looking into rental housing of how it exists today in the nation through policies, and then focusing primarily in Mumbai. Able to show the website? No, this is not the website. Renting realities, it's called. Yeah. So this is a research project which we, the phase 1 of which we have just finished, and the idea was to take it to everyone. So rather than a publication in the form of a book or anything, it is we converted into a website. So all the research is uploaded here, and the research was done in identifying our own field of understanding of what rental housing means, and it is primarily understood as a financial business deal because it is always associated with ROI, your return on investment. So we have been, when we study different models of housing, rental housing, we always kind of critique as to why rental housing has not been successful and what are the urban forms or the maintenance models. But how even to reach that stage, one has to take 3 steps behind and look into how they get to be made. So it is a financial model. So finance plays a big role, land plays a big role, urban policy plays a big role into it, and real estate plays a big role. So you click to the research on top and maybe just go to policy. So, so this is the website where all the research is put, and scroll down. Policies also we were trying to map that there's been almost a 100-year gap, where we actually have a rental policy to deal with. First to showcase, what has the contribution, um, with various national level and state policies and programs which have come. What is the role of institution and how institution gets set up? Why what is HDFC formulated? What is the role of the National Housing Bank? And how does finance kind of support this? So moving into different legs, we went into real estate and where we looked into the state of housing at a national level, how does your urbanization rate and the market size and where do you sit? And as you urbanize and in a democracy, how it is different from a different form of governance and what is the scope? So basically, if this is a business transaction, then what is the market which rental housing has and will see in the coming 15 years? Only then investments would come in this area. And the first movie which I showed you was to show in a way that there is a need for rental housing because it is in relation to affordability and it is across income brackets, right from the most a person with a very good salary where because of taxation it becomes more beneficial to stay in a rent than to own. So those kind of models were also studied in this to show and build up a stakeholder network where policy, finance, real estate and users came together. And this was done in collaboration with the industry. So we had people from the government as part of discussions and roundtable to build a recommendation to be given to the state government. This is a first phase of this research which is handed over to the state government. And we engaged with financial institutions like HDFC, National Housing Bank to understand taxation and at a central level how even income tax rebates can be given to encourage rental housing, how land can be subsidized, how PSUs can be formed at the central level to induce rental housing at the state and the city level. And that took us to microfinancing, where the first microfinancing institute was formulated by Madhusudan and Jayesh, and now it's run by Birla. So even how low-income loans function in order to support this dream. And there's a whole lot of data study in this, how the urban youth relies more on rental housing because of job mobility. And then it went ahead to startup models of co-living by Arusha, which started for providing co-living spaces for blue-collar jobs, and now to young couples or bachelors who are moving cities and looking for accommodation. And startups like Nestaway who are procuring apartments and buildings for student housing. So putting all of this together, we explored the real estate angle through MCHI and certain developers to see why developers are not getting into affordable housing. So all these stakeholders formed roundtables based on which the recommendations were made, and the next leg is of its translation into urban form. Play the Living in the city, we started intervening with things which concern us, and being in Bombay, which is considered as the financial capital and the most advanced city in a way in the country, we always felt that somewhere our lifestyles are still compromised. I mean, you have a better quality of life in a different city than being in this city, which is positioned as one of the most advanced cities in the country. And with this exploration is what kind of centers us when we are looking for opportunities to intervene in the city. You want to play it like this? You can just increase the viewing ratio here. Yeah, I think this is also okay. Yeah. So, like I said, that is what maintains our focus, and we focus to work with the city and the people, and this takes us to places places like the open space, and affordable housing, accessibility. These are the areas where we have been engaging with the city in the past 10 years. What we have realized is that it is not only through a partnership PP model that you are able to engage with them. It is also it is a collaborative effort where the larger idea is not to just demonstrate or do a project, but is to enable them so that they understand that there is a process and a way of changing their own neighborhood to what they collectively wish for as a group or a community, and that enables them and empowers them in a way. So this is generally most of the projects, research or advocacy we get into is to enable this process in place. So many a times it is through research, or it is through a real project implementation, or it is just through a community participation or a capacity building. So it takes the form based on what is our start point and where we are engaging. And in the past, the collaborations have been through all of these different stakeholders of local government, the academia, especially the elected bodies. So now when the city does not have the elected bodies in place, we see the difference on ground in terms of receiving fundings to support a project, or them reaching out to other funders so that it gets enabled in doing a project on ground. So with this, the plurality is both in the stakeholders we engage with, and also in addressing the different the pluralities within the city. So this is basically the 5 ways in which our project kind of diversifies. Sometimes engaging with the community has led us into research and an inquiry. And sometimes in order to understand a certain process of implementation or to refine a process of implementation, we have picked up projects and done with different stakeholders to in a way outline the process so that more projects can shape up. So I'm just going to show this, because these 4 projects, actually there are 5 projects, but 4 is something where a certain degree of success has been met in the past 5 years, and it has been an incremental process. One is a public park. This is in Kaf Parade. And one is it's called the Machimar Nagar, which is the fishing community. And there is a footpath, and there is the Kaf Parade metro station, which has just recently opened 2 days back. So this is the area where we have been engaging with the local elected corporator and the women from the Machimar Nagar. And that was our start point. Starting from there, our engagement went with different stakeholders from the government like Sistra and L&T, who is constructing the Cuff Parade metro station, the people who are living in the high towers, which is a different residential sector altogether. How when they all converge to a point with different expectations, these projects have shaped up over a period of time to them. So one was this basic footpath connection from President Hotel till the Machimar Jetty. And we wanted to give the ward a template for footpath with different conditions. Like if a garbage condition comes, or if there's an opening which to a society gate comes, how do you handle the footpath at that point in time? The idea was to equip them with various conditions so that they in a way get enabled to implement it wherever required by identifying the condition. So that's why we have a scale like thing where over 100 meters you recognize condition and then you implement. Now the problem is in the process of implementation by BMC, they never kind of commission an architect or an urban designer into it. It is given to a contractor. And there is very less overlap between these two agencies. So what's get implemented and when it gets implemented, sometimes even the designer is not aware of. So little things like how you tuck on your design sheets the lamppost, but when it is implemented, it can sit in the middle of the footpath. So these kind of discrepancies do happen. This is how public projects, which are small scale public projects, are implemented. And through this process is where we were trying to condition BMC and the local board as to how you can have uninterrupted paths to walk. So we were outlining the process. So in a way, it is an experimental project for us in order to educate them. This was the public park we did. This was again one of a very successful project, and it's working very well with Sunday festivals and music in the park happening, and it's been utilized for skill building, women spending time during the day, and it is working quite well. But if you look from a landscape architect's point of view, or you go to the park and see whether how good design and finishes of the park are, it will not match to something which you would expect as a landscape architect or an urban designer to be. But again, I think the satisfaction you get to see that it is used by so many people and a space which was considered unsafe to use is being utilized. So the lesson which we were trying to give to the local body was that safety was an issue for you, crime rate was an issue for you, drugs were an issue for you. So how through good design those things can be changed. It is not actually the quality of the paving that you are putting or the joint detail is coming properly or not. Because the usage of the park is such that we have realized in almost 5 years that I think in another 2 years BMC will again put a tender for kind of repairing it, because that's the footfall which the park sees here. This is something which was a very controversial project. It sucked a lot of our energy because it was filled with encroachment. This is at the Machimar, Machimar Nagar 1, where you have access to the jetty. And this was fully encroached with cement shops and boat parking. And the community within themselves had a drift as to they did not want the cement shops to be there because they themselves within the community felt their space was encroached. And with a lot of negotiation to kind of carve out infrastructure so that festivals in Machimar can shape up, the women can have employment, because there was a decline in the earnings of these families residing here, that we chalked out a viewing deck, a pathway where you can even kids can play and you can host festivals, and the boat parking can happen. Like just behind there you can see some boat parks. This went into negotiation of how allotment of boats are happening, how much parking you should do, what are the boat sizes, and we had rounds of meeting in Vidhan Sabha regarding this. And with, I mean, I have very interesting photographs of this area where you are facilitated with garlands and there are 50 policemen standing next to you to kind of be able to put these spaces. So even in terms of design, the artwork which is here is done with the community sitting there so that they kind of take an ownership to form this adda kind of a thing where they can sit there in the evenings and they take onus of a sense of belongingness comes that they want this project to be done. So this is somewhere during the time when it is constructed, broken. It was the first time they printed the entire plan on a flex and put it on one of these walls. In 12 hours, there were 16 policemen standing there to pull it down, and it was such a controversial thing that you cannot reveal the plan which is coming to the public for whom it is being built. So those are the conflicts, you know, which happen when you get into work environments like this. This is a completely different stakeholder here from Machhimar Nagar to all the societies which surround the Cuff Parade end of the line metro station here, and they came together because these buildings face each other and the metro came in between. Initially it was a green space and they had no clue because somewhere the government does not inform or engage in community participation where they spell out what is coming or what is getting built. So there's a lot of uncertainty and fear, even in that case, in this case, you know, where the plan is not revealed or the design is not revealed to the people. So they wanted to understand the design as to what is coming, help them understand technical drawings, and then kind of see whether local issues can be addressed, because much ahead there is Ganesh Nagar, which is a very large slum area. There's a police chowki, and with all of this we proposed a sports arena here in the corner on the surface design. So basically this is already designed by ACOM, but the surface design was again reproposed as people's plan with all these communities together, and this plan was used as a negotiation tool to understand, because sometimes it becomes ambitious where they went with some fancy proposals which had to be explained to them that this is cannot be done, and also what can be done. This also sits within the Art Deco district, so how the superstructure appears were also a part of the negotiation. And we realized that in order to manage the youth there, a sports arena would work very well, and we tried to convince the 16 high societies where we said that if you do not want the whole surface area filled with people in the evening, you have to engage the youth with positive energy. So they understood why a sports arena is required for the youth, and they voted to build it there. Now the negotiation with Sistra is on, because Sistra does not want to put a public toilet there and build the sports arena. So these are the kind of conflicts you would deal with. But this is the larger goal for which, you know, these kind of projects we get into. The idea was to, with the ward, at the ward level with the commissioner and the ward committees, was to set up a placemaking cell or local area planning cell and see how it can enable them, along with funds and some powers, to have more neighborhood projects from different stakeholders. So this has reached to a point where a few corporators believed in this model and they were ready to float it on the BMC floor. But now the story has changed, because there are no elected representatives till the time we have elections again. So I'll skip these slides because they just get into more ways in which we have engaged with the community and how help them to understand their demands, and what happens when you have exclusive demands, and what happens when demands converge and they become collective. Is it easier to then negotiate a deal with the government? So these are the various scales when given an opportunity, we pick up to inform us and our understanding as well. All these examples were at the neighborhood, street, and municipal level we did earlier. And then through research, it is more at a city level and across cities. This is a book which is co-authored by 3 authors, and it is a comparative understanding of 3 metropolitan cities across the world. And the idea was to see that how policies, local cultures, and regulations and governance has shaped up cities, and how we can see whether if there is any learning for us, and then give our recommendations for new emerging cities in the country. All these cities are very different, and how Indian cities function, we outlined here much at the start of the book. These are our core beliefs. Through these lenses is we studied all these other 4 cities in order to make the recommendations as to what is the nature of land of Indian cities, then what equity in India means, because equity in India versus equity in New York is very different. So we lay out our core beliefs right at the start of the book, and through this premise then we move into these 10 aspects which are studied in 2 volumes. The first volume is a comparative which shows how things have changed, and also the second volume is a lot of data gathering we did through RTIs, writing to different governments in across these cities, and we found that data is not that easily available, and especially in Indian cities. So we thought of having this mappings also as part of the publication, where each city can be understood across these 10 aspects by itself. So that makes the second volume of the book. Based on our recommendations there for extensions of urban areas and emerging cities, we did one alternative proposal for Mumbai Port Authority for Elphinstone State, where the policy here, the status is that it is a commercial area. So the policy which is there of the DCR does not acknowledge residential at all. There's a lot of encroachment on road which is BMC owned, where you have informal settlements, and on the port trust land. The moment you're on central government land, your evictions are different from the state government, because land is a state subject. And when the DCR is in a draft stage and does not acknowledge the land use of residential within this place, when there is so much residential, how will the form and development take place? So this went into form studies, transport, and a lot of finance, because again the Port Authority, it's a commercial land use here. On lease, they wanted to understand any development which happens, will it lead to revenue or loss? So this entire proposal was then churned out, and we also had, because this was a project with Howard Studio was also looking into, so the real estate department. So along with them, we shared insights of what our working was for 6 months with the Port Authority. This is something we were revisiting our own project after 10 years. There was a proposal of community land trust by us as a way of development for Dharavi. Today, when Dharavi is being developed under a different tender, again this went into a financial study of how many people can be accommodated. Do we really need additional sales in residentials? Or there is a way out where this becomes the affordable way of living, and only affordable residences fund the project instead of a saleable component which is purely luxury. So this was just to kind of demonstrate, to show that it is financially also viable. It is not the only way that you get into an SRA model where it becomes financially viable. But these are studies sometimes are fall only on deaf ears. Yeah, so I'll not go through others, but this is what I was trying to say, that before we actually get to design the architectural and the urban form of it, a lot goes before we get that opportunity to do that. And if that is our objective, then then we have to create those conditions, and that is where we step back to enable that kind of a stage for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Jasmine. And I understand that there's so much to discuss in the fine workings of all these projects, and we'll never be able to do complete justice in such short time. But thank you so much for sharing all these studies, which are already so insightful. Our last presenter for today is Sarfraz Momin, and I'll, without any delay, I'll ask him to come over.
Oh, oh, great. It's working. Excellent. So, hello everyone. My name is Sarfraz. I'm the co-founder of StudioPod. It's a urban design planning only firm. We started in 2013. And the idea was that Mansi Mahesh and myself, we were all sort of in different areas, in different geographies. Mahesh and I were in US and we were working. But then we realized that there is so much work that needs to happen in urban design planning back in India. We decided to move back. Mansi was working in Accra, in Africa, and then she had the same thing that, let's see if we can come back and try and create an impact if we can. And that's why when we started StudioPod in 2013, we called it people-oriented design. We wanted to not name it Parfaraz, Ohesh, and Dancy. But I don't know if you, so we've been called that once, like, oh, is this your first name? Like, no, how does POD stand for anything? Well, anyway, we got a alternative name or a full form today, so which is also something that we would consider. Our practice deals with large scale master planning from like thousands of acres all the way to the smallest sort of or 100 acres, 550 acres, and even smaller than that. And one of the proud things that we do announce everywhere is that we're like a homegrown firm, and we've won 15 international awards in the last 10 years. And it's for the projects that are implemented in India. These are not projects that we've implemented except for two, which is but we've been sort of focusing on how do we sort of elevate the level of consultancy in the country, how do we bring urban design and planning to the foreground, how do we talk about bringing about change at a larger scale, and then of course great architecture which will follow. We have like a lot of these, we have 6 or 7 different ideas that we always bring to the table, but I'm going to talk about 4 of them. One was, when we moved back from the US, a lot of people, when they met us, they said that you sound very American. You sound like you have all these ideas that you bought from the US and they don't work in India. So one of our job was to see how do we become more Indian. So like besides this, of course, how do we convince that you are more sort of, what is the thought process of how do we sort of make Indian cities or master planning, urban design, planning more Indian. So we had to come up with stories. This is one of the story. On the image on the left hand side that you see, blue is a tank. And this is a little portion of the south side of our peninsula. And this is all the way till the Bay of Bengal. And so in this small area, we have close to like 3 lakh tanks. And the earliest tank was reported to be built around 2 BC. Every 3 village used to manage 2 tanks. So what the idea about this was, because the rivers were not perennial, they were part of a system of connected sort of tanks. One overflowed into the other, and people stored water over a period of time so that they don't have to depend on the year-long sort of, water supply issues. At that point of time, our infrastructure was quite decentralized. People used to manage their own sort of, we've been used to managing our own water, sewage, garbage. And then, of course, the colonial sort of rule was making sure that we don't manage our own infrastructure because they wanted to collect tax from us. So then they centralized a lot of our infrastructure, and that's the, I thought it was quite relevant, the topic today that we're talking about, how do we look at what is Indian and how do we sort of move ahead. But again, when we started urbanizing and the growth of urbanization or the pace of urbanization is so fast that we've started to ignore these systems that used to be in place. And the reason why this happens is also because there were tanks and there were areas that were low-lying that were now being built on without even considering there were tanks or lakes. So we end up with similar picture every once in a while when there is this flood that is taken over the city. And then, of course, the very next year, I guess it's going to wait till next year. Come on, wait, no, yeah. And the very next year or in a couple of years, you have a situation where there's no water to drink. So the idea was to sort of, it's really important to understand what is the underlying system of organized, that is organized, that our cities are organized around. And similar story in the north of India, you see that the blue sort of darker area, this is where we're losing our groundwater table at phenomenal pace. So this is where we're losing it at such a pace that we're going to run out of water pretty soon if we don't do something about it. To understand land, to understand water, and to understand people was one of the things that we had to bring up in our stories. So when we came up with this one project, so these are just random selection of projects to talk about how do we approach the same sort of ideas. This was a greenfield project in outskirts of Pune, and we had to come up with a master plan or an urban design plan for this. This was what was done already on site. It was going for approval, but then this was by a developer named Godrej, so they wanted to do an urban design sort of an exercise which would have a little more response to the whatever context that there is, right? But for that, we had to then go back of what is the context. It's not like the site is empty. It actually has these two ravines, and the ravines took all the water before the development came to the river. So it had a connection to the river, and what we did was in this master plan, we just made sure we maintained these two ravines, which were these, and they sort of create an interesting green necklace with the river itself. And the way the flora and fauna used to work will work again in future if at all there is more development that is coming up. And that interestingly became like the framework of the master plan, which was about sort of creating this park network first, thinking about what would that landscape do. And this was called the Ravine Park. This won like 3 or 4 international awards. One was with International Federation of Landscape Architects, with World Landscape Architecture in Australia and others. But the important thing was we needed to talk about how gently can we build on land that is sensitive. So we restored the ravine that was there. These were also some sort of stakeholders that used to reside there in this neighborhood. And then again, a lot of engineering of how do we sort of first maintain what is really nice over there, and then how do we emphasize and make it better. So some of the landscape was we made sure we built like a little canopy walk, which would be going gently around the same park. People can engage with the landscape. Over there, we built a little machan where you can climb up. When we built the machan, we did not think that it would be such a success, but it became like this sunset point where people now congregate, and then sort of it's become like a real destination of sorts. And then sort of, a lot of time was spent on understanding the edges of how will the new development have an edge with the park, how will they connect very easily. And then in a similar manner, Godrej said, you have to do our other project as well. Over there, again, water was the focus, but you see that we built like a massive sort of connected sort of bioswale network, and there was a retention area that we had created. Last year, the entire area flooded, and our park took the entire brunt. The development was completely safe. So that was what the park is now looking like. We have a little bridge that goes over it, and we have this similar ideas that everyone has been talking about, nature-based solutions that we can use, and how can we create like these really interesting places. Other challenge that we do face is when we talk about mobility, everyone talks about congestion. But we need to talk about, is there room for everyone on our streets? They used to be, we had Hathi, Ghoda, Palki, everyone was part of our streets. And unfortunately, there is a big elephant in the room now. Not the Hathi that we are talking about. It is actually the way we are developing, we might need like 6 times the size of roads already that we can't build. No city, no country has ever done it. But we are going towards this doomsday sort of scenario. And really the idea has to be, how can we change our focus from moving vehicles to moving people? And by moving people, obviously we mean that we need to take into account that a lot more efficient way of moving people is using public transit, then walking, cycling, and of course, very, very important that we deprioritize this infrastructure that is focusing so much on cars. And then, of course, we worked extensively on a lot of streets of what can happen, how can we redistribute this space. That's when we sort of came across this PPP project in Lower Parel. I don't know, have you guys heard of One Green Mile? Yeah? So One Green Mile was one of these projects where there is an entire stretch of 2 kilometers where we had to sort of think about how can we redivide the space. It starts from Fool Market in Dadar all the way to the Lower Parel under the bridge area, and it's like in the middle of everything. But what we had to create was this idea that can we shift our focus a little. What used to be completely taken over by parking, by a lot of encroachments, just vehicles lingering around on our streets. With very little space for people either to walk or even, and like creating this congestion that we are always within it. It was a 3-stage sort of process. We started with a little tactical urbanism trial where on day 1, the day we tried the trial, which was we barricaded few areas and said that the traffic can move from one side, a little child showed up with a tricycle on day 1. So we knew we were onto something. So, but then what we sort of also had to substantiate this was with numbers, saying that we can actually make this work, what would be needed. So we showed them that how will the traffic move, so you have to substantiate it with quantities and numbers like Jasmine said, and of course created a robust network of what can this street be. A part of it was using the infrastructure piece that was under the flyover in an innovative manner. This was a collaboration of 8 different consultants. We were the urban designers. There was MBRDB involved only for the under flyover area. There were landscape architects, 2 landscape architects from Interiorscapes and others working on the other areas. There was a lighting consultant involved. So there were 8 different people that had to work together to achieve a project of significance. So that is the first tactical day trial that happened. It was really heartwarming to see that there is a need. Of course, humongous amount of effort on detailed drawings and everything, but the idea was to see if we can program it for a lot of different times and a lot of different stakeholders. And then because of that came really interesting sort of ideas that how can we create a little more fun, a little more play under our infrastructure pieces. There was a whole study center or a Vachanalaya, which is a very Mumbai thing that we introduced back again, redesigned a little bit of urban architecture and of course a lot of greenery that could be introduced. So what used to be completely Ubers and Olas and buses hanging out, there is parking space available in this neighborhood. We did manage to get a lot more public and private support to see if there could be a refocus and attention diversion towards people more than objects. So, and then that has been phenomenal. The before-after pictures have been really interesting. Just the amount of children that came to this neighborhood after this project has been one of the bigger successes that we measure this project by. We introduced, this is the best piece of architecture that we've ever implemented, is the bus stop, which we designed. It used to have, if you see the before picture, it was, like all our bus stops has a very difficult back. The sidewalk at the back would not be seen. And this essentially we just opened it out and we allowed people to hang out. So there are sort of all sorts of interesting things that happen when you allow people to sort of own this space. What used to be like this underutilized space under the flyover has become quite quite an interesting play area for all ages, people from all dynamic. It's really dynamic through the day. People in the afternoon come there to relax, have lunch. We've seen birthday cakes. We've seen other different things happen over there. And a lot of kids, just amount of kids that have come and reclaimed this space is phenomenal. Of course, and lighting played a really, really important role. It's become, so one of the jury members from the AI award in Hong Kong told us that this picture looks fake. Who dresses up to come to a flyover? And I said, you should come to India. It's like, if you have a great space, people will come here and celebrate. So this was one of the big, finally a 15-minute debate happened that this is Photoshopped. We had to, like, the jury members in the end concluded that no, probably in India this can happen. But that's the Vachanala. It's extremely busy through the January to April, the study months, and the other times as well. But in the end, what did we achieve? We actually introduced 2 signals, 1 U-turn, a new U-turn. We did a whole mobility study on intersections, everything. We did introduce like half an acre of extra park space and 100 more trees in that entire neighborhood or the street. And of course, the play space has become a really big sort of destination. And similarly, like we have like urban design in a city has like a really interesting challenge. It has, if I could go back, come on. You can do it. One back. There. What we used to have is really interesting. So I'm like really using the force. Then it is working. Here in an old picture, we had to convince these stories through old picture. What is this that is really working in this street? This is Gwalior in 1870. What's interesting is we had room for everyone. On that pathway, like we said in the earlier case as well, people were walking. There was also cow path and spaces for horses which were not paved, which was interesting. But we had this connection with businesses at the ground level. We had housing that was looking and taking care of the entire street as well. This is like established concepts of, you know, having eyes on street, the lively nature, the vitality of Indian cities, which is something that should be celebrated. Unfortunately, the way we are building our cities has either a high wall, parking, it might be shaded, but it is really creating a lot of barriers, very little connection to people in our cities. If you understand, there are parking garages coming everywhere. There is hardly any connection of Aji looking from up, down, greeting everyone, saying that Kashi hai. And you know, that sort of a human level connect is where we are sort of missing that aspect of city living that our Indian cities used to have. Now, in that, what I meant was this, right? It was the scale. It was very important, who are we designing for? So one of the campuses that we're doing in Jaipur is about human scale. It is about understanding how can we create this scale, this connect of a street which has edges that are equally important than the street itself, and the built form responds to it in a very interesting manner, where you know the stakeholders are sort of going through an experience of coming through gullies into chowks where most of the conversations happen, and then create an interesting neighborhood that would actually have so many different shades to sort of explore every day. And the plan, this was again a competition. We won against 6 international consultants. We were the only Indian consortium that won this master plan. But it was about creating like a gram or a village of sorts, which had, what it had was not look like a village, but it had the bones of a village. It had these little gullies, chowks and trees that would really create. And we're building this right now. With essentially the scale that was very important, not the architecture. And it's an institution, it's a university that we're building for leadership. And the trainers here are headmasters of school villages or village school headmasters that are coming here for training. So when they come here, they should feel at home. They should not feel like they've come to an alien space. It sort of allows them to learn a lot more. And what is important is not the architecture, but the spaces that the architecture creates and then shapes, so which will remind them that this is familiar, yet it's new. And similarly, when we're dealing with high density sort of spaces that we are working on a lot of these interesting urban design exercises, we are focusing more on people. What is the ground floor connection with it? There is like a really interesting exercise in the West where they show one space in 4 seasons. So they show it in summer, in winter, in autumn, and then what we tried to see was maybe we should talk about in India, we should talk about 4 festivals, of how that same space actually converts into different areas of can we sort of see our spaces that are inclusive. It's about people, how they use the space, and can it be sort of programmed in a very interesting manner that will, shape the future cities to be more Indian. So that was my last slide. So thank you all for your attention.
Thank you for your presentations, and I must, admit that I'm no expert or I don't have any background in urban design or urban planning, and so my questions are more towards learning from you all rather than, you know, interrogating. And I remember that when I, for the first time, went to Kamlaraja, I went to Paul's cabin, and he told me one thing that at this school we don't make any difference between city and architecture. And at that time, I didn't. It was the first time that that kind of a thing was posed to me. And subsequently, while teaching with Rupali in her studios, I understood what actually Paul meant, that how the city is an integral part of our experience and how architecture allows us to kind of cull it out in our work. And so with that, I've grown to kind of understand architecture extending into the city, and how city processes shape what we do today and our practices. And in all the three works, all your three practices, I see that engagement with the city happens very interestingly with different kinds of people at different scales also. For example, in Paul's work, the community engagement is so intimate and evident, where the form is never evident, but the processes take the shapes of these diagrams, and which are arrived through at by spatial mapping, and then maps become a very important way to spatialize urban kind of processes. In Jasmine's work, we see the emergence of the way in which the municipality becomes a very important mediator for the architect to approach and devise ways in which new kind of practices can be invented at the neighborhood level for intervention. And of course, Sarfaraz, in your practice, we see how you firstly kind of engage with a lot of private clients, but also kind of draw them into the city and large scale projects where you draw in the forces and the experience of the city to shape the scale of experience at the people level. So we already see this diversity of the way in which the city intersects architectural practice, and I just thought I'll ask for, I mean, in all in architecture education, we are often kind of trained to imagine to be building for just the private individual or a private stakeholder largely, whereas a practice that intersects with the city opens this up completely differently. So I would like to, and this is an opportunity for us, particularly those who are living in the city, to understand what are the different directions that our own architectural practice can take, and you all have demonstrated that. So I want to open this discussion by asking you this question, that what are the different stakeholders that one can start looking beyond the private individual to engage with the city through architectural practice, and how does urbanistic thinking help in articulating those for one's, deploying one's architectural ideas. If any one of you would like to respond.
I think firstly, architecture contains you in a space. Like, I mean, that's where we start with, because it's an enclosure of sorts. And whenever we step out of that enclosure, you are in a collective space. And no matter how many private buildings come up, you eventually come, a Ferrari has to be driven on the road. So, so that's where the number of stakeholders happen. It is lot to be, in my understanding, it is dependent on how the city also grows, how developed as a city it is, and what is the governance there. If you see at a village level, what is the governance, because how land is owned, whether you have been collectively doing or putting, collecting all your eggs together and then, kind of running the farm kind of situation, where we come to a city like what Sarfraz was also mentioning, like initially the infrastructure was very managed at a village level because of taxation, the things change. So those are the governance models which kind of have evolved. And based on these kind of backgrounds, the stakeholders have changed. And somewhere from self-built, because if we see in small cities, mostly it is self-built, that you're building your own house. When it comes to densities is when somebody is building for everyone into an apartment kind of a scenario. How much room has been given for to be built? You asked this question, that how as architects we can engage in the city. So that's where the notion was, kind of created, that it is more self-built in smaller cities. So you have a plot, so it was more of land ownership and then you build yourself. But the dynamics changed when the city grows and dense, because now the land is not there for each family. Now you are getting stacked vertically, and that's where the stakeholders started to change. And the provider for the built space changed. And again, what happened was the role of the government changing from building towards facilitating building. So again, the stakeholder kind of changed. We have reached to a point where we are going back and asking government, please introduce design back into policies. Please have designers, because we are now making a shift from a very need-based country to a country where we want certain aspects to be delivered on a certain format. So we have gained that voice where we are coming out and saying no, there has to be a space for car, plus there has to be space for people to walk. And this is not the narrative in all Indian cities. It is not when we say, okay, Mumbai people come together and they have that spirit to get things done. It is very different from any other city, which might also have that spirit, but majority do not have. People don't come. Even if you see society meetings or something to volunteer about, people don't come together to kind of do it. So when those kind of spaces have to be designed and there's no designated or appointed person for it, then who does that job? This is where I think our policies are, at least for urban design. If that's where the design component in the city comes in, there is no mandate to have an urban designer anywhere. And because the city, the colonial way in which the cities have developed, it was to maintain or to kind of provide infrastructure. So hence the design again hasn't come in. So BMC's mandate is to maintain or is to provide infrastructure. It is not to, address local issues and then have a designer on board or a specific professional to look into that matter of, say, well-being, or how health can be addressed through open spaces. These kind of correlations are yet not common knowledge on their form. So hence these roles have not been embedded into it. So the more variations and practices come out and our engagement with government and people come, only then these plugins will come in. So today, whosoever understands this narratives becomes the kind of a stakeholder to engage with. So that's why I said the starting point for all our projects are very different. We have residential associations as as a client or a stakeholder to start the project. We have people who are victims or affected who are bearing the burn come together and asking for a remedy. So they become another stakeholder to engage with. This government who wants to kind of showcase, okay, it's my end of the term, I want to, retrofit or do something as a display, as a show. But these are the problems or ills, social problems. So then we change the narrative for them. Okay, this can be your display project, but if you engage with a designer, your social problems can also be addressed. So they become, in a way, your another client or the group. So I think if we are able to manage, and the first thing is the people should know, like, okay, we have this right to go and appoint or understand somebody and to pay for it. Because like we do not take interns and for free, we always pay them. Okay, and so the same is our expectation. If we work for the government or for the people, you have to acknowledge our efforts. So there's always a fee component attached. But this is again something which is not well received by the government, because they want all these public things to happen for free. So then CSR corporates come into play, like in 1 Mile, it's a CSR project. So they become another user group. So they have various user groups in the cities.
Yeah, yeah. Paul?
I completely agree, and I think, I think one of the things that I was sort of understanding was one of other conferences that I was in. It was about sustainability in media and other sort of conference that I was at. I realized there were people that really wanted to bring about change in all sorts of different fields. So one thing that I would encourage all of us to realize or understand is that as urban designers, as architects, we are one of those impact or change makers who can do something about the built form. But there's so many more sort of heroes out there, or proponents, and we need to collaborate with them. That means that we have to talk to the government, work with them. We have to work with the private developers. We have to work with the NGOs. We have to work with anyone who wants to do anything and bring about change in a positive manner. We should be there at the table, at the discussion, not the one who's taking the decision or sharing that this is how it is done, but be part of the discussion, right? That, I think, if we can just inculcate this culture that we are one of the people that can create this movement or be part of this movement, and there are many more that will build a city together. So the idea that an architect can build a city is very 20th century, like, or one person can build a city is also very sort of old way of thinking. Cities of tomorrow will be built by all of us together, and it's about how can different stakeholders come at that table and contribute in a meaningful manner, right? So I hope that addresses.
I think what I also meant by my question is that like in all your practices, the conversations that otherwise an architect would have would be with a single individual, and you all are saying that these conversations now diversify, and so that is one big kind of change that happens when you engage in a kind of urbanistic practice. But Paul, I would like to hear you.
Okay, so I think that actually, Anuj, that's a space where I think we can reframe even the way we approach architectural education. Okay, and that's, I think, a great possibility for innovation, because a lot of our education still believes in a final product, like even in your thesis, even in your all the years that we actually look at, like, what is going to be the final drawings that are going to be the outcomes. Okay, so but I think today we need to engage with like processes which are more than just the creating the build. Okay, like I'll tell you examples. I know that even like things in like the government of India has lot of schemes. The government of India has schemes like PMAY. Okay, even when we are doing the lake restoration projects, they have schemes like Amrut Sarovar. Okay, but in none of them you will see architects. In none of them you will see that there is urban designers, architects. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is that like you need to be able to, from the schools we need to be able to innovate, we need to be training our students to engage with these processes which generally we don't engage with. Because today imagine PMAY is giving money to individual houses of people to shape, they do it on their own. But look at the possibility if you all intervene. Okay, if you all intervene as people to give them design solutions to build better environment, better housing. Now the question which comes is how do you get supported? That's the primary question which we are trying to answer, because obviously this needs to be, Jasmine has said that also what we are doing needs to get acknowledged, and acknowledged in terms of also a financial model backing it up. And that's where I believe the challenge is. But the financial model is not only the model of the private client coming to you. Okay, these are possibilities which require engagement, advocacy, changes in terms of government understanding the importance of the fact that yes, you need to address climate change. And today you have PMAY. Okay, so how can these funds be used to organize SDGs, which your architects can do? Architects can play a very important role because all governments are signatories of SDGs. Okay, but I think from our schools, the fact that our projects can start understanding this and creating probably projects which engage with these processes also, just not a final product, can be possibilities that we can look into to develop new course curricula and making our course curricula more relevant. So it's not that it's like something we need to do it, we need to all do it together. Okay, this requires like a lot of changes which we ourselves need to understand in the process of, because there are a lot of finance out there which like we are not aware of, but which architects can play a role. Architects can play a big role in trying to shape. I just gave you one understanding of how government funds can be engaged with. We don't know how to engage with CSR funds also. We might like try, but we are not trained to it. We try through our practice, we now try to engage with CSR funds, but we are not trained. Like this can be a possibility, this can be a way, like even your, because remember the process actually develops the product. Your product actually comes out because of a certain process. If there is incremental funding, that's how your product will also happen. The product will evolve slowly, it won't be a final product. So that's how things have to be understood. So probably if we understand this, there can be ways we can innovate. I'm not saying that I have the answer to it, but I know that there are possibilities of engaging with this, and we need to be aware of these processes. Our schools need to open up, and that's where we can innovate. That's what I have to say.
Thank you. I want to go slightly back to our own brief for this whole, series, where we want to kind of look at also the millennial archaeology of this practice. And I remember that during the 2000s, a lot of my colleagues were, enrolling for urban design courses. Many of us kind of wanted to do, after finishing architecture, we wanted to study urban design. Everyone was studying urban design. And then we were going out, we were studying urban design, coming back, and then the problem that you pose to us, or what you were asked of, that, your designs are very American and they do not kind of talk to the land. So I want to kind of understand this whole kind of cross section where number one is that that there is a moment when there's a realization that something needs to be learnt to be handled at a larger scale, which is urban design. So and that there is if looked at from an architectural lens, that it has an aesthetic value which needs to be which is consumable, and And this is the Western model is of course kind of teaching us to make more beautiful, pristine, and more importantly sanitized environment, because that's what allows you to read clear form. But how does that fit in with the almost in some sense growing complexity of the city over the millennium here? If you can kind of, because I think you all gave it a different spin, and all of you in some sense made this more contextual in your own ways. So if you can talk about this kind of tension from your experience, that will be very interesting to hear. Sarfraz, I think you have the most direct experience, so please tell us about the way in which you said that you Indianized, and what was the struggle, and what was the way in which you understood what is local in some.
So it was an interesting journey. Growing up in Mumbai is such a privilege altogether, because you grow up in a super hyper dense environment. I then was planted into this suburbia of sorts in Ann Arbor in the middle of nowhere, and I just couldn't fathom. For the first 6 months I was so lost. It's like, what is this place? How does this work? And interestingly, in the urban design course, there was a lot of reading about, people and Jane Jacobs talking about cities, and I was like, this happens in Mumbai. What is she talking about? What is new about this? And then I realized, when you look through a lot of American cities, a lot of other cities, you understand what they were trying to sort of allude to was this amazing life that can be there. It can be about people. It can be about vitality, community, this, that. My first trip to Chicago, I remember going there like a little child in Disneyland and thinking, how clean is this place? And why is it so clean? And I felt so out of place at that point of time. And the next trip was to New York, and I realized that New York was a little dirtier. I loved it even more. I was like, this is nice. This looks like a real city. Like real people are living here. It's like absolute speak in Spanish. It's not living in a hospital of sorts. And it has to do with city planning. So one of the things was that Chicago has these back alleys where all the kachra is, and the avenues are really clean, whereas New York has nothing of it. It has just a simple grid, and people throw their garbage right in front, and it's picked up from there and whatnot. So what happened was, since I was planted into this alien environment, I started realizing what was really nice about cities in India. Slowly and steadily, I started unlayering these aspects of what is nice, what is something that we must sort of cherish, preserve, and the biggest thing is the amount of diversity that we have here, the amount of color that we have in our cities, the amount of vitality that we have is unparalleled to any other place. So in this process of becoming Shanghai or becoming whatever you want to, Singapore, we might end up losing a lot of good things that our cities have. So I think one of the biggest learnings for me was to go out and then look back and sort of introspect of what is it that works. Is there some and there is an order to the chaos that is sort of there. Can we untangle some of the little bits and pieces of this complex city building exercise, because no one has done it before. I don't think other cities can claim to have the complexity that we live with. And more we realize this, that we cannot be anything else. We have to be what we are and just really embrace it in that sense. So that journey was really helpful for me in that aspect, saying that, okay, when I came back, these are the ideas that I learned over there, I applied across the world, and I am trying to see if I can fit this. But there was a little iteration of saying that, okay, in India, this might work, this might not work. To go to a city official and tell him that, you shouldn't be driving in a car coming to here. He'd give you a 10-page lecture saying that how I need to build 100-meter right-of-ways. A city official would say that. Engineers would say that. If you go to a private developer, he would say that, oh, my car is my family member. Like, oh, where do we start? Where do we start this understanding that, okay, what is possession is possession, people are people and whatnot. So there is a lot of these negotiations that you have to go through which our cities really give us an opportunity to talk about these relationships. And city building is in general an ever sort of, you're in this loop of negotiations of multiple different complications that will be thrown at you, in which we just have to keep learning, to keep improvising, and then sort of respond to different challenges that are thrown at you. So that really helped me, saying that, okay, one other thing that really helped me was to go and learn all the mistakes that the West have made. So the coastal road that we have in Mumbai was done in 1970s in New York. It ran through neighborhoods, 1950s actually, ran through neighborhoods, cut off New York's Manhattan from the waterfront. So when you know that, okay, this has happened somewhere and what are the impacts that it has had on people, can help us leapfrog that. So we wrote articles, we did this, we did that, but we tried, but similar thing we tried in Dal Lake, where they wanted to build a massive highway next to the lake. Over there we were successful to stop it. And we presented an alternative idea and the government lapped it up. Unfortunately in Mumbai we couldn't. But these are all these little learnings that every city has to offer to you. You just have to learn to read what is it that I want to take from this and see if it is applicable to our context. Will it work? Will it not work? Is it Indian enough, or is it, how do we then sort of make it a little more hybrid of sorts? Like, we are a civilization that has been, for so long, we've just been, making sure that we mix a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and then our thali is complete. So, that's sort of a way of incremental ideas that can make sort of, really, really interesting solutions. So.
Okay. So first of all, I believe our city itself is a place where we need to start with and build a theory for the city. Okay, not as we are talking about, not look at the outside. And that's where I believe that, like, this whole understanding of patterns which are there embedded within, okay, understanding processes which are embedded in our city, very much, lot of it is self-organized, okay, is a very important endeavor for us to do. And once we start theorizing our own city, start building our own theories of our cities, then we will probably get possible interventions which will respond to these patterns. Okay, so for us, very clearly, and that's what I was trying to show in the beginning, how mapping becomes extremely important, how mapping and revealing becomes very important. Like, what are the processes, who are the stakeholders, because they will be the final, like, people or stakeholders you will engage with when you bring the idea of the intervention. Okay, now what shape it takes, whether it, like as you said, the image, or whether there are other like aspects which need to be understood when we are intervening, is something we can decide. Because there are many other aspects. It cannot be only about, like, the idea of how it looks, the idea of inclusivity, what we talk about. Are these projects inclusive or not? How do they impact things like livelihood? Those can be other aspects we can bring about in our projects. Okay, but what I am trying to say is that for this, the whole process of building a theory from within is a very important process. There are already people who are doing it. Already people like Jennifer Robinson talks about how the ordinary is so important to understanding our cities, that so it's a counterpoint to the idea of the global city that, like, people like Saskia Sassen have, like, all spoken of. So these are already efforts that we can add to. So if we add to this, there are possibilities that we will create a design language of our own, which is bereft of this baggage which comes from outside.
I think as a populous country, we have to understand where the masses are and what realizations they have as a collective, and what realization few people, who have traveled and come back have created. So there are a lot of perceptions which are created, like Mumbai has to look like Shanghai, or look like Singapore. And these are like, you open the front page of the newspaper and every day you see that you want to live closer to a certain lifestyle, this is how you should live. So every day over so many years, those perceptions have been put on people's mind that what you have is not good enough and it has to match this image. We all love to have pani puri standing on the street, or just having a flea market experience. But if it happens in Geo Garden, it is different, versus if it happens in a weekly bazaar, it is different, which is happening since so many ages. So the belief of what we want is still there with the masses. Because if you see the larger vote bank, they function the way it is, like, so that belief in them is there, because they are not opening the newspaper in the morning and reading it. Now maybe they see it on a lot of WhatsApp and these videos and TikToks and floating around. But the whole notion of a pakka ghar, no matter how that looks or what it is, even, we are saying with vernacular material and architecture that is more sustainable now. The youngsters are getting patents for how mud architecture is more, kind of a health conducive environment. That belief is not there. That's because what even Paul is saying, we haven't theorized, our way of living. I mean, if we want a semi informal space as part of our road section, does the Indian Road Congress acknowledge that? And do we budget that space on the road when we are carving out a new greenfield project? So those are the questions and recommendations we explored in our book also. Like, this is the way we operate. So why can't we have the onus and be proud enough to dedicate a space for it? The moment we don't dedicate, it becomes illegal. It gets termed as informal. You have to, you say it's encroached. You want to push them away. But that's the way we function. So
What does it then mean to even compare a New York and a Mumbai?
So those are just perceptions, because it's projected.
And what comes out of that?
That is success. That is where at a global level you meet. So one of the debates we were doing within our authors was that do you compromise a local vision versus a global vision? Like, you do not have funds here to provide houses for all, but at a global front, the city or the country has a different image, and you're going to fuel that with the money which can be utilized somewhere else. So there's a compromise happening at what is the projection as a nation on the global level you want to do, and at a local level, whom do you align with? So that's where China is different. Like the 6 cities which we picked up was based on, they all are democratic cities. We deliberately reviewed on, we also wanted South American cities, but then we already have 2 volumes, so it was not possible. But that's the reason why we did not take up any other city where the governance was different. Because it's a very different way of developing. Like, China is more developed than New York if you see the infrastructure in China and compare it with New York. But New York as a state versus Manhattan as a borough. Manhattan is not a city. So, those are the perceptions.
Right, but there was a very interesting point you had mentioned in your presentation that, and I completely am forgetting, but there's a sense of it now. Something related to the fact that how something in New York cannot be compared to something in Bombay. It was something related to the livability or something. And therefore, because I think we compare ourselves to New York or Shanghai because of their image, not because of their processes. And that's why I was asking that what does it mean to kind of compare Mumbai to, why not compare Mumbai to Lagos, or why not compare Mumbai to Brazil? Because our pain points are similar. But we like to compare Bombay to Shanghai because there's a hidden kind of movement that Mumbai has to attain an image that is as glamorous as New York.
See, I'll tell you what, our curriculums of ICSC and everything are not done by us. Paul was talking about architecture, like undergrad course. I go back to high school and, your junior school. World politics was never taught to us. I mean, okay, we know UN is this, UN is that. That is a very, kind of, at least you acknowledge things. But we haven't really studied global politics. our minds haven't been conditioned to kind of understand what is the goodness within the way we operate. You have to go there across oceans to make that realization what he was mentioning. Like coming back, I understand why Mumbai feels the good part in Mumbai. And is there a way that after that realization has, got inside your DNA and you have accepted that and you respect that you've translated into design? So that's what I'm saying. Unless we do not kind of respect our own culture, it will never see the translation.
True.
Of it.
And I was also like through your presentation, I was also thinking that the tools that we then use to enter into our field are also so colonial that probably we need to kind of, because we draw like the idea of the street section is is a received kind of, like there's an idea of what a street section, how segregated it should be, and we don't think of it in terms of mixed use, that everything should be segregated, whereas right now we exist in a very kind of homogenized space which operates in time rather than space and so on. So but this is very insightful, thank you for that. And I want to pose a last question and then open it to the audience, or should I? Yeah, sure. I think we can take questions. We are already way ahead of time, but maybe a few questions from the audience.
Yeah, great presentations. I just wanted to talk about the city of Mumbai where we live, and so we know how dense the city is. So first question is, do you think there are ways in which the current density can be mobilized to make the city better? Because it is difficult as of now because of the rapid urbanization, which is not stopping anytime soon. So is there ways in which with the current flow we can make something better for the citizens? And second, I think when we talk about urbanization and all those things, it is about one of the aspects of it is the towers which are coming up. And when we roam in our cities, we always cross through these paths where we see इधर पहले कोई तो स्लम था और अभी अचानक टावर आ गया, which changes our experience completely. So is there a way where the coming up towers or buildings can, like it's like the emergence theory where एक building का edge change होगा, वैसे ही अगर सबका होने लग गया तो I guess the city will become more active, like the edges I'm talking about of the buildings, which are not interactive now because of the parkings. Like the parking goes till 15 floors, 10 floors, so the streets become dead. So is that one of the ways in which the city can again become active and safer?
It's not a big ask, I would say, but it is a very big to provide for. Why I say so, a lot of our cities have grown organically also rather than being fully planned, and a lot of infrastructure was never placed. If you study the master plan or the development plan, the way we want to introduce open spaces or amenity spaces is ki, okay, it is reserved for something else. When that plot will get developed, then a part you can use for development, but rest has to become the amenity. So the whole city waits when the owner will decide to build that plot, then that amenity will come. Unless there's too much of pressure, where the people themselves are requesting the government, no, we want it, it's the need, like what now is happening with Dharavi, that no ward wants to accept the population, and they are saying, no, please don't bring them into our ward because we do not have enough open spaces, why should we bring more density in? So having said that, came the culture where land is acquired, gated communities, township comes, and they call it is for the commons. You know, the word is just the same, but mind you, this is not the commons at the city scale, it is a common within that private enclave. Because there also you have more than 100 apartments or 200 apartments, so there also is a collective, no? It's a common space. So that common space versus the common space in the city are two different elements. You know, I have seen a presentation by a superb developer in the most expensive suit, where he's talking about giving how he has not, how he has, you know, kind of utilized the paid FSI to, for an activity which is amenity. You know, so it is like a give, he's giving so much to the common, but it is paid in the per square feet because it all gets built up. So with these kind of things, everything has become privatized. Today you feel safe when the park is inside, when you step down, and outside the number of amenities have reduced in a way. So these have created these edges where you want to have that as a part. When you come at 8 o'clock in the night, you want to walk when public parks shut at 8:30 or 9 in some neighborhoods. Where do you walk? You can't walk on the street because the footpaths are either not there or they are not continuous. So you want a space that you can walk within your compound. So you again go. So it is, you are deprived to justify a lifestyle. But if the provisions have been made much earlier, like our current work right now project is in Alibag, because Alibag is now seeing a lot of development. In a way, a lot can be done much beforehand. But the government, we spoke to planners in government authorities, I'll not name the authority or the planner, but they're like, ऐसे ही होता है, you know, like, so there's nothing wrong in that image, in that mind, the government's mind of growth. So they are very okay, like the ordinary, the way which Indian cities are developing, they are fine. This is how we plan. So there is no idea of the form which you are talking, engagement of that facade or first two levels in the way we plan cities today. So that realization is not there. It is about economics, land economics, revenue. It is about providing that as a facility. That aesthetics, that integration, those things are not on their priority list. It is on our priority list. So that's why when he mentioned, you know, if you are able to sit on that table to communicate that, that's when the dialogue at least starts. Otherwise, there's no acknowledgement of that dialogue. So today, when two states are making their design policy, Kerala has already done and Assam is making, that's where the designers are coming together, different kinds of designers are coming together. Yet, even if they are 20 design streams talking to each other of how they can contribute to the city, are there other stakeholders on the city who will facilitate that, who's going to put the buck on the table, okay, this is how you can do it. There is still more stakeholders with we have to engage. So till that time, we all are not sitting on a table, this communication will not open up. So the more cross engagements we do, even in our studios, bringing in different professional on the board, then how these things will happen. It's easier to do. It's not a difficult task to do, but the dialogue is not happening. That's why it's a very difficult to provide for, because there's talking happening around that.
Thank you for your presentations. It was wonderful to watch them. Um, I'm struck by the kinds of provocations that you all made, and so a specific question towards all of you together, and then individually to each one of you. In the city here has been seen as a space of lack, a space of crisis, a space in which to make provisions for. And in your urbanistic practice, you are making an argument saying that we need to kind of think about theorizing from within and from here. So my question to you is, what concepts emerge that you would like to throw out for us that have emerged from your practice? And there were some that you alluded to, for instance, in your case, Paul, the question of mapping. But the question of mapping, is it something that really comes from within? I mean, particularly referring to the second project, that the community engagement that project has required. What concept of community does it throw out? Like the idea of a community is a very generalized concept, but do certain conditions, say for instance in the peripheries of cities where you've been practicing with both of the projects that you showed us, do they throw up specific ideas of communities or concepts about the community? In your case, you spoke about through your project, you spoke about a tactical engagement. This tactical engagement, how does it kind of compel us to think about the drawing of space that you showed? I mean, that the drawings of space that you showed us were plans, sections that one would have otherwise, worked with in any other conventional forms of planning. Does tactic change the form of drawing as an understanding of space? So how does it build on the understanding of space? Is there a specific conceptualization that emerges from it? In Jasmine, your work, I'm struck by the several actors and agencies that you point out to. Is there a specific conceptualization that emerges that architects can kind of, build on or should engage with?
I don't do that, so you'll just get clubbed. I mean, I also had a similar question also because we are in an academic space and also because particularly Paul, you spoke about this idea of theorizing from here and also because this is, we are looking at an urban design panel in some ways here because there are very particular ideas and concepts that have been thrown, the idea of the legible, the idea of the order, right? So I'm also thinking of, say, extending that question to the idea of urban form. What would some of the concepts be that you think would emerge from within our context? What is it that we love, right? And what is it that we really cherish about our cities? And what are some of the concepts of urban form that one would derive from here? Okay, so just adding to that question, and if you can answer together.
Okay, so I think first I'll take Rohit's question. Okay, like community, in our case, especially in the case of the water body project, okay, it's a complex understanding of community where we got the opportunity. Remember that the community that we were working with in Vasai Virar, first of all, there is a clearly layer of history, which is very important to form that community. Okay, they like exist from right from the Mughal times, the Portuguese to the Marathas. So there is a understanding of history which has made the community cohesive. Okay, the second aspect which has made the community cohesive is their resistance to the like whatever pattern of urbanization happening in the Vasai Virar region. Okay, the community that we were working with actually is a part of, if you understand the geography of Vasai Virar, people who come from Vasai Virar, is something called the plantation zone. Okay, which is a zone still which practices agriculture, which has fruits growing, vegetables growing, fishing happening. So that's a community that gets formed because of these forces. There is a resistance to the pattern of urbanization, which is of high rise, which happens in the other zones of Vasai Virar. So that is the reason for a cohesion which forms like a basis for support for our project. That is restoring water bodies. Okay, why does restoring water bodies work in that region? Let me just tell you, because they are facing a crisis of water getting used by a lot of the lobbies. Now they have stopped it also, a lot of exploitation of water from the region around, which is urbanizing fast, which faces water shortage. So we got immediate support from the from the community for restoring, because they speak about it. They speak about the fact that they call it Harit Vasai movement. So they speak about the fact that like we need a green Vasai. Okay, but like our project, like they supported, one of the reasons they supported because they saw that this could be actualized. Okay, so these were the like complex processes of formations of community, which is very different from the ones which we are working with when we were working in the auto rickshaw case of the auto rickshaws, which were actually migrant communities coming from outside. Okay, very different, absolutely different. Okay, like they are the people who are very vulnerable, who are very precarious. Okay, we in fact we are doing a study now of their working conditions. Okay, which shows the precarity of what they are actually involved in, but they provide very essential service. They provide very essential service in that suburb. They provide mobility. Understand, mobility is the backbone of livelihoods. We have studied mobility deficit areas in those pockets where we have seen that women and children just can't move because the auto rickshaw stand is 35 minutes from where they live. 35 minutes. You cannot walk that. The state of the street is bad. During monsoon, it's not walkable. Okay, so it's a different understanding of community there. Okay, so clearly these formations, these complexities are something, and it's not, as I'm saying, it's like as Rohit has pointed out, it's not homogeneous. We get different responses from different places. Even within the community, like there is no cohesion. Okay, but I can say that, only I can say that, like if you need to be able to do such public projects, there are people, that's a very important part. You need to engage with them, because finally, remember, it is their locality. You can't just go and intervene into their locality. Okay, so they are a very important stake, and there will be resistances which you need to negotiate within the community, even which you will be negotiating, because even in the case of Vasai Virar, they are politically divided. The community is politically divided. Oh, we are still working with it. Okay, with all those divisions, but we are like being able to see some possibilities of intervention. But those are the complexities I was talking about. Like what you see of the real is only a part, very small part. There are so many forces which as urban practices we need to understand and engage with. Okay, and as far as the question of urban form is concerned, okay, one of the important aspect which we are learning through our projects and which we are like very clearly is about accessibility. Accessibility is very important. I think what you also are talking about is this question of how architecture can be made accessible, though it might be private development, but like there are many cases like you have seen even in like the historical part of Mumbai fort areas. The buildings are private, but they have a public face. They have a public face. Okay. So yes, I believe very important to our engagement with architecture in our context is the fact that though it might be private, though it might be like, how do you make it universally accessible to all the diverse communities that we have in our city?
Would anyone of you like to respond?
So, two questions. I think one of your questions was how, for different solutions, there can be a different mode of, you saw the same plan section, elevations, and the tactical intervention was something that you wanted to ask about, whether it is. Correct. Just the genesis of the idea come from this tactical intervention? Is that the question?
No, I'm asking, the tactical urbanism is a very interesting concept.
Yes.
And in its Sarthu's formulation of it is the idea of subversion. Subversion of what is established, right? So in that subversion, does the drawing of the space have to be different? Like Sarthu would talk about not, or implicitly then allude to the fact that one does not make a master plan, but rather make very small, and his idea of tactics is then that of subverting this order of the master plan. Now, in this project, the idea of tactical urbanism that gets mobilized, is it subverting the master plan, or is it kind of just a way of engaging with the master plan that, that betters it?
Yeah.
So what does tactic do to the idea of space?
Yeah, so it was essentially the tactical urbanism bit was as a proof of concept to begin the project. If you go to any government official and you tell them that I want to increase the footpath, they would just like तू कुछ भी ले ले footpath मत बढ़ाना बस like जो चाहिए वो but footpath नहीं बनाना क्योंकि गाड़ी का क्या होगा. So to prove that, you have to create these little tactics saying that it's your perception. In a lot of cold countries, what they do is they track the car's movement on snow-clad, or when there is a snowfall and there is entire thing is white, they just track the cars and they say that see remaining space is not used. So it's a tactical way of proving that this space is available for people. Now this is not new concept. It's about showcasing your idea. The tactical bit of it is so showcasing your idea in a very different manner. I could draw it and show it to them and they would argue till the evening saying that this is not how it works, this is not how India works, everyone wants their cars. Or I can show them by cordoning off some small portion and saying that nothing happened, the cars were moving the way they were moving earlier also, it's just that we have a little more space. So in different areas there are different tactics that are used. A lot of times communication also follows the same tactic of how do you get your word across. And most master planning urban design policy is counterintuitive. If you want congestion-free streets, you probably should have smaller streets and more of them rather than really large streets, which is very difficult to explain to an engineer, or a very methodical way of explaining these things is to show them that a network works better than really wide streets. It is something that is counterintuitive, right? Saying that no, obviously if you have wider streets, then you will have lesser traffic. If you have a coastal road, then there will be no traffic, but then your coastal road is landing into your old city somewhere and there is going to be an impact. So you're going to transfer one amount of congestion from a faster to the other junction. So, but it is also one of these very, very counterintuitive master plan. Urban design and urban planning are really counterintuitive. You have to engage in the study of and the research, which is what Paul is also sort of adhering to, is that this indigenous research of why is it important to have those rickshaws there? They do such an important job. They have a really critical role in a city's functioning. We don't acknowledge it. We think that if we widen that road, things will be fine. Something will happen. A similar manner is this complete degradation of BEST that has happened over a period of time. It's systematic degradation and investment in rail, right? So it is like a lot of metros, but somehow BEST has sort of taken a really backseat. These are really counterintuitive, saying that no, but train takes more people, so it is good. But you don't understand that the train has limitations, and bus has a role, BEST has a major role of the last mile connectivity, rickshaws have a role, unless we acknowledge that. And this is the whole idea that we need to not only theorize, but also embolden our sort of research, bring it out into a rational it's really difficult to convince people about what is a great city. For instance, one of your questions was, what happened to the mill lands? So what went wrong? I think really jazzy buildings came up, really nice tall buildings came up. What is wrong with that? That's what development is. But if the basic was that what works in New York is that there is a grid, every 100 meters there is a way in which you could cut across and go to the other side. And then you have tall buildings that are private realm, and the private and the public still has a lot of area given back to people where it is not blocking large chunks of your land in the center of your city. The mill lands actually are one of the biggest lost opportunities because there's blocking a huge piece of land that is completely privatized, has no engagement with the city, has taken everything from the city, but has given very little back, right? So the learnings are out there in terms of built form. It's exactly there that We should have had more streets that would have cut through these midlands, which would allow more people to engage with the city that were not connected, would now be connected in a lot of ways. Another really successful thing that we found in our practice is, if you tell people that don't build a compound wall, they'll look at you as if you've asked them for their, what are you talking about? No, we can't like not have a compound wall. So one of the ways we figured out is, what if we introduce retail on the ground floor, which is a very Mumbai concept. If you go to Delhi, there are planners in Delhi were fascinated with this idea of a shop line. Shop line as a term in land use planning exists nowhere but Mumbai. Yeah? And it is so sort of inherent and naturalized to our city that new things that are coming up, obviously they'll have shop line. But this as a concept to New Delhi or a Raipur is absolute alien. But what we've done is essentially allowed a lot more activity on the street. There is shops who are taking care of people who are walking outside. They are sort of engaging with the city in some way or the other, and the private limb still sort of thrives at the background. There are these really interesting little forms that we can definitely inculcate learning about what works in a city and what doesn't work in a city. Again, another really good example that I think about is that it's like a piece of art. If city planning was a piece of art, one was the functional bit, that the city should function. It should have water, it should work, it should drain, it should have food security, it should have densities that can be managed. But at the same time, there is a little bit of poetry in sort of city building, like in architecture, like in everything. If you were to go to the fort area, you feel a little more sort of cohesion over there. You feel different over there from, suppose if you go to anywhere else in the city, which is Lower Parel. If you transverse through Lower Parel, it's still South Mumbai, but it feels different. It's slightly different. Or a Shivaji Park, or somewhere else where you go in Bandra. It's slightly different. The interesting bit about urban design of the fort area is that not all buildings are hero buildings, right? Like, it's collectively creating an experience for you. You walk through the colonnades of fort, and in the end you end up with the VT and the BMC, and there is this really interesting building that is as a landmark at the end of it. So some bit of architecture was harmonious in this entire city building exercise. Not every building was saying that I'm special, I'm special, I'm special. You need to be away from the street to look at me, and things like that. They were sort of cohesively creating a really interesting built form, which was essentially creating a structure for the city. Flora Fountain creates that really, this is the space where it opens out, and then it narrows down. Then it again goes into, the entire vista towards the sea. So there is a little structure to it where everybody is contributing in and cohesively sort of creating this thing. So there is a lot of form, impact of form that this definitely has in city building.
Thanks. I think it's time, and just pulling Rohit's comment to conclude this, that I think what Rohit is saying is that congestion is the city. And how do we then begin from there, and not to erase congestion, but to work with congestion, because then it is against cohesion, and it is against clarity, and it is probably time to find ways of inventing ways of working with cumbersome inclusion. And I think with that, and also since I said that congestion is the city, Paul has to take a Virar train back home, and we'll have to close this session. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing your thoughts. And this also brings a closure to the first part of our conversation series on architectural practice in India, a millennial archaeology. We will start back with our new set of conversations in the next semester now, and we will keep you posted. So please stay tuned to our website, ccity.in, where we will update with the next set of speakers. Thank you so much, all of you, for making time to come and share your experiences and works here. Thank you.